My name is Nahyan Fancy. I'm the Al-Qasimi Professor in Islamic Studies at the University of Exeter. Just moved to the University of Exeter after 17 years at DePaul in Indiana. I work on the science and medicine and the intersections with religion and philosophy in Islamic societies in the pre-1500 period. The book that I'm going to be talking about was Science and Religion in Mamluk Egypt, Ibn Nafis, Pulmonary Transit and Bodily Resurrection, that came out with Routledge in 2013. So the book is, as is quite common with a lot of academics, based on my dissertation. My dissertation topic came about because I was doing a PhD at Notre Dame in history and philosophy of science. I had strong interests in investigating the intersections of science and religion in Islamic societies. There were a lot of narratives that were abound about science and religion and science in Islamic societies. Some great challenging work that was coming that I had been reading, and it didn't match up with my training in the field and in kind of general surveys. My strength was originally in astronomy. And so I was originally going to do something related to mathematical sciences or astronomy. And then Ahmed Dalal, who became my advisor, was visiting Notre Dame, said to me, there's great work you can do in science and religion based on astronomy, but you have to get into the technical details in the mathematics. And you will lose your audience, particularly those who are going to employ you during job talks. And so he goes, but no one's really doing it. This is way back. This is early 2000s. No one's really doing it in medicine. So why don't you do that? So I was like, okay. So that's how I got started my work. I ended up focusing on Ibn Nafis. And my proposal was actually trying to understand why he posited the new route of blood through the lungs, so what's called the pulmonary transit, instead of going with the norm of suggesting that there are holes in the septum wall of the heart, and that's how blood gets from the right side to the left side. I wasn't really interested in how that's related to modern circulation or anything. I just wanted to see what would lead him to say that. How do I understand it from within his context? And I was reading a couple of his works. One was his Risala Fadl ibn Nataq, which is a treatise of a kind of a defense against Hayy ibn Yaqzan on how traditional truths also are solid and rational. And philosophy cannot lead you to all of them on its own. Revelation is necessary. And there was a line in there about related to heart, spirit, production, blood, which looked very similar to me to the line that he had in his anatomical text, and particularly his interesting ways that he was using ruh at that time is what I thought. And so I said, I'm going to try to find out what's going on over here, because there's a religious text and a medical text that are using some similar terminologies, and I'm going to try to figure out what it was. And so 200 odd pages later, I was able to come across and provide some things associated with it. Yeah, so the main arguments of the book, as they transpired, was they evolved to going for the dissertation and doing the research process and then into the book. But the main argument was basically that we need to understand, well, I shouldn't say the main argument. The main theoretical perspective was, how do we understand what he's doing from his perspective? Which meant trying to do away with modern expectations of any kind and really try to understand as much as possible from within his lenses. How is he using the word ruh? Does it even mean the same thing as it did in Ibn Sina? Does it have slightly different connotations? Spirit, soul, faculty. Does he use these terms differently from Galen, etc.? So my notion was, if I see this term, I'm not going to assume it's Galenic. I'm going to try to let him show me whether he's using them all in the same way or not, and then follow the discussion wherever that way lead me. So if, in order to understand better what he means, I need to go into his hadith text or his philosophical text, I will do so. And he was good. He sometimes signaled to that and those connotations. So my main arguments in the book were basically as in the particular climate of late Ayyubid, early Mamluk, Damascus, and Egypt, as competition amongst various religious scholars and and scholars of all stripes is increasing, and there are some massive debates, theological ones, philosophical ones, issues surrounding what philosophy is claiming with regards to access to truths versus what access religion has, challenging certain kinds of truths in this post-Ghazali, post-Fakhruddin al-Razi milieu in Damascus in Syria. I showed that the medical text is absolutely conversant. Ibn Nafis, as a physician, was conversant with these conversations and in fact contributed to them. And so his medical result of the pulmonary transit is actually not the one that he originally sought out to do. It falls out as an anatomical corollary of the larger investigations he has with regards to the understanding of soul and its connection to the body. And the crucial part there is that this is not purely a religious theological debate, right? Our terminology gets in the way. So the medical understanding and how do we understand a living body begins with the notion that the living body is ensouled or has a soul and the dead body does not, right? And so the living body, in order to function the way it functions, the soul gives certain powers to aspects of the body. And so the book showed that he's engaging in those discussions, but how those connections work out for the living body have some repercussions for larger debates related to theology and resurrection as well. So what I showed in the book was that he's enmeshed in these debates, he's sorting these out, and these medical discussions are relevant for these larger philosophical and religious discussions, and particularly showed that he had a specific understanding of how science and religion should interact. Broadly speaking, these categories are our categories too, right? But he had this notion that one reason can take you as far as it can, and one should go along with it. Revelation provides you certain truths, but they are afterwards still rationalizable, right? So he was a firm believer in that. You may not arrive at it on its own, but once it's been presented, it can be rationalized. And so he does that with hadith related to resurrection, where he picks up the Ajb al-Dhanam text. He uses that in his medical understanding as he's trying to understand the soul-body relationship. He has to reform multiple things, and this is what I showed. He has a new idea about how chief organs work in the body, how faculties are given, what role the spirit has. This has implications for not only the pulmonary transit, which falls out, but also a new theory of pulse in terms of how the medical pulse works, and also a new understanding of generation and how generation works and how male-female parts come together and where and how is the soul embodied and how generation takes place. So fetal ensoulment from a purely medical perspective, and what role the male and female contributions play in generation as a critique of the medical physical understanding of Ibn Sina is in this text, and it's coming out of these larger discussions. The structure of the book is, it begins with, of course, an introductory chapter, which takes us through, at that point, remember, dissertation was written, completed 2006. 2013 is when the book comes out. Thankfully, lots of good work has come out since then as well, and had come out even before then, which is cited in the work. But it sets up what kind of historiographical obstacles we have faced to even approach a medical commentary written by a guy in the 13th century, trying to understand his result from within his context. Why has that been so difficult? So the chapter 1 sets all of those historiographical obstacles up. The problem of the decline narrative, right, and how that's prevented some of our understanding of the area. How can we think about historical actors? Why do we assume that faculty, when it says faculty in Galen and in Ibn Nafis, it means the same thing? Why do we assume that, right? And so it sets all of that up, what kind of challenges we face to set up what the book's going to do. And then in the next 3 chapters, I try to situate his work within his corpus. So chapter 2 deals with social and political transformations going on in late Ayyubid, early Mamluk period, how that impacts scholars and various other kinds of things, a critical examination of his biographical entries, who provides them, why and how are they referring to him, and what do they claim about him, so that we can get some aspect about where does he fit in his ideas about revelations, and then reading his own work on hadith and showing how he lives up to or does not live up to certain kinds of things that have been said about him or not. Chapter 3 then dives deep into his philosophical text, which is a fable response to Ibn Tufail's Hayy ibn Yaqzan. So it shows what Hayy's text had done, Ibn Tufail's, how someone like Ibn Nafis reading it would have seen in it and what he would have thought about responding to, and situates his understanding of soul and spirit and the science-religion kind of relationship, or falsafa, religious text relationship from within those texts, including discussions surrounding resurrection and what Ibn Tufail has to say about it, what he has to say about it, and those things. And then chapter 4 dives deeply into the medical discussions to show how has the meaning of faculty and soul and spirit preceded understandings of chief organs, and how they've evolved from Aristotle, Galen into the Arabic tradition, and what subtleties are present in Ibn Nafis, showing his disagreements and movements away. And it charts all of that and shows it, I hope convincingly, in terms of his new understanding of the role of the specific chief organs. Liver is no longer a chief organ. The heart is a chief organ, but the heart doesn't receive all the powers from the soul at that point, which is what Ibn Sina says. Instead, only one particular one about movement, and then the soul gives the powers to the nourishment of the body, just to the body by virtue of being connected to it, and the notions of volitional intentional emotion and other senses come to the brain after the spirit has been refined over there. So I set up that physiology in contrast with others. And then chapter 5 looks at what are the fruits of this new physiology. So the one is anatomical pulmonary transit of blood. How does that fall out of it? Why does he need the spirit to be of a particular kind, which is why it cannot be corrupted by blood coming in from the right side of the heart to the left. The next one is generation. If the soul is what gives powers, then how is it that Ibn Sina can maintain that the father's semen plays the active role of molding the mother's material in the womb, because the powers can only come from the soul. So that means the father's semen, which has left the father's body, is somehow still connected to the father's soul, and he says that's idiotic. And so he says the father's semen has no such powers, neither does the mother's semen. In fact, they both mix together, and then the material is ready to receive a new soul, and that's what guides generation. And the third one that he has is on pulse, which is the same thing. He has these ideas about how the heart works and kind of an animating aspect that comes to the heart in the production of the spirit and innate heat. And for that reason, he turns around and says, no, there is no such thing as a vital faculty. So the pulse is not caused by the vital faculty. Instead, it's caused by the motion of the heart kind of expanding and sucking back the spirit from the arteries, and then contracting and sending spirit back into the arteries. So again, it's not our modern understanding, but it's not Galen either, right? And then the book has some concluding aspects about where it succeeds, where it fails, and what more can be done. And an appendix where I showed that a text that's been usually associated with them, the epitome of medicine, is tricky. And it seems to not have any of his novel ideas in it, at least from the theoretical aspect, very minimally. If so, it seems like someone's using his text to update the abridgment of the canon without fully accepting his. So it's not really his text, is what I argue as a possibility in the work. And I've done more work since then to try to get a better handle on that. When I first started the project over a decade ago, the entire notion, again, as part of those narratives that I'd inherited earlier, which led me to the first book of Ibn Nafis, the idea, in fact, and this was so hard to get out of that even my almost last sentence in the book is incorrect. It says something about, and it's in the appendix, which says, maybe Ibn Nafis's theories were not picked up because everyone went used the abridgment and not his commentary in the canon. Since then, I found out, of course, that's false. And what I ended up wanting to do in this next project is, well, now that I know it's not just the anatomy, but so many other things that he changed. The epitome does not actually have an anatomical section, but it does have all these other theoretical sections. So the project is in Ibn Nafis's shadow, because what I found is that, yeah, all of these other theoretical discussions which are part of the Mujas, so discussion of chief organs, vital faculty, and even pulse, Ibn the Mujas, the epitome, has those discussions. So the idea is Ibn Nafis picked up in any of these discussions? And of course, I've been showing in some publications that have come out, but a monograph that's in the works right now, first draft completed, is to show how widely Ibn Nafis's shadow was spread across the area. And so he was not forgotten. He was not rejected for being non-Galenic or anything like that. He, in fact, guided subsequent research. Not everyone agreed with him. There are all kinds of changes and modifications that keep happening, but they're in his shadow, hence the title. And I'm still focusing predominantly on the theoretical sections for the book and charting a longer history of how he works the commentary, the genre of the commentary, how that encourages particular kinds of takes in terms of the way they proceed, and of course the specific discussions. Again, my interest is in larger philosophical discussions. So the chapter on pulse, some of it has already been published, shows connections with discussions on motion. And, positional motion, volitional motion. How can we understand the concepts of space and place and those sorts of things? So these are all physicians who are engaged in these discussions, who are writing these commentaries, which means medicine and philosophy did not part ways. And same things happen with the generation debates. Religious and theological discussions start making their way into the medical discussions at times, right? As do others, and they clearly have an eye out. So they're very deeply intertwined, and we need a much better understanding. And if someone were to say, oh, okay, it's just these authors, these commentators, well, three of them, Sadid ad-Din al-Kazaruni, Jamal ad-Din al-Aqsarai, and Nafis al-Kirmani, are the most widely available commentaries on the epitome and still found in the Unani curriculum in India today. So these are the standard medical works that people were reading, right? You began by reading the Mujas, the epitome, if you're getting trained as a physician, and you usually almost always read it with a commentary. And it was one of these three commentaries. And so they were immediately introduced to something of Ibn Nafis. I mean, despite the fact that the Mujas is associated with him and sometimes doesn't have all the novelties of his original text, the commentary, it has some, but not entirely. The commentaries on the epitome always put those things in. Right, so any reader immediately has access, sometimes to reject it, and in other cases to uphold it.